Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. I'm Nerdarch Steve, and today I'm joined by Persephiroth. Did I say that right?
Persephiroth, but it's fine. No worries.
I imagine I definitely do not have a silver tongue. That is for sure.
No worries. I'm sure you'll do fine.
So, how are you doing today?
I did not mute this stream. Hold on. I am doing great. I am excited to be here, excited to have some fun and talk some nerd shit.
Yeah, that's what we're all about over here. So, if people aren't familiar with you, where can they find you, and kind of what's the elevator pitch for what you do?
Hi, I am Persephiroth. You can find me at Persephiroth on basically every social media that I am on TikTok, Twitter, Twitch, like the whole nine yards. I am a TTRPG content creator, video game streamer, sensitivity consultant, model, and cosplayer. I think that's basically all the things that I do. I am also the DM of the podcast Fast Times at D&D High, which you can find on basically any podcast platform where you get your podcasts from. And that's my biggest project currently, besides some things I have going on in the works for later.
How long has Fast Time been running?
Fast Times has officially been running for. Okay, so it depends what you mean by running. We've been recording for a year officially this month. We've only had the podcast out since July. So it's been about 6 months since the podcast released. The new season premieres on. One moment. The new season premieres on the 27th. So season two will be coming on the 27th. So it's a good time to check it out.
So what is the premise? I mean, obviously, I am a child of the '80s, so that immediately invokes some imagery for me.
It does. So Fast Times at D&D High is a dramedy, like comedy drama podcast about these four mischief making, well, not necessarily mischief making, more like misunderstood, partially mischief making teens that live in a world called Cisternia. Cisternia is modern entirely, but has technology based on magic and crystals and a bunch of other stuff. So it's basically all the D&D races exist in this world that is modern and coexists with magic, and they all attend different schools that are all founded by several heroes that were famous in the country that they're from. The game has a lot of angst, a lot of comedy based around being pubescent. It's just a really good time in general. It's fun to record.
It seems like a huge undertaking, and you're the GM for this.
I am the GM, yes.
So, did you basically have to like reinvent D&D for this, or is everything just a reskin? Or what is kind of your methodology?
So it's a homebrew world outside of the D&D like core universe canon. So yeah, I did quite a bit of reskinning, but you'd be surprised. It's pretty easy to switch out electricity for magic and doing all this stuff because not for nothing, we live in a world where video games are super popular and we have games like the Final Fantasy series where this stuff coexists. So there's a little bit of suspension of belief that you can already play on with this kind of thing. And the reality with all the D&D races and stuff is just that just like real life, there's different people from different walks of life. They just happen to be, different kinds of humanoid rather than different races. So, although not for nothing, my game is hella inclusive and diverse as far as representation goes, both switching up how D&D races portray themselves and sort of opening it up to, real life racial interpretations as far as can an orc be black? Can an elf be black? Can an elf be Asian? That sort of thing, as well as, LGBTQIA themes are a huge deal with it.
So, what kind of stories are you guys telling over there?
I don't want to give too much away because there's a surprise that happens at the end of the first season that completely shifts the kind of genre it is. No spoilers though.
Yeah, maybe
Uh,
not specifically, but I imagine like they're not delving into dungeons.
um, it depends on what you mean by a dungeon. It's not traditionally so, but anything can be a dungeon as long as it has exploratory nature to it. So, like, their school can be a dungeon. There's a part where they are in a cave that could be a dungeon. Like, I basically view like every part of the world as sort of like a modified sort of dungeon. Like there are different parts that they can explore and go through, and like sometimes those go in depth, sometimes they are, things you can just like dig into. But as far as like straight up dungeon crawling, no.
Um, so what is your kind of like style of play? Not particularly for the podcast, just in general. What is it that
Uh,
you enjoy?
I am a very role play heavy GM. I'm also someone who rule of cool is the biggest rule for me, no matter what system I'm running in, no matter what system I'm playing in. Though more important when I'm a GM, because I have more control over that. So it's really important for me to focus on characters and who they are, and like sort of create content that's tailored to that, and to really build up bonds between the people at my table. So it just so like immersion and investment are two different things, and investment tends to be more important to me, and by building those bonds and by creating this world for them to play in, you get more investment, and that means they care more. So that's really what I aim for as a GM.
Do you have advice for other GMs who want to maybe move in that direction of gameplay?
Find, podcasts and groups that you listen to that have GMs that are really good at that sort of thing. I know Matt Mercer's good at it. Brendan Lee Mulligan's good at it. Gabe St. James is good at it. There's a lot of different people that you can sort of like tailor your play style by watching what they do. The other thing is to one ingest literature, ingest like stories and stuff where the character development is key. And also, I tend to think of games almost as like ensemble TV shows, where that when you think about that, you don't think of something as having a main character. You think of it as like this group coming together to build this show up, and no one's necessarily more important than the other, but they are all important in their own ways. And sort of thinking about how you can sort of poke and prod and twist and pull to get these strings to come together into this sort of woven blanket rather than just a pile of yarn. That will definitely help you in the long run.
So, what are some of the upcoming projects you're working on?
So I have a project that is going to be on Encounter Roleplay that has not been announced yet, but that should be happening in mid February or so. Um, and I don't think I can talk about it directly. But I also have Critical Love, which is the first stream project that I'm really taking on, which is a bachelorette inspired D&D abomination, is what I'm calling it. It is a show where I will have 15 players. Each night will have a group of five, where they will compete for the attention and affection of a love interest. There will be guest judges. There will also be some really ludicrous challenges in there, because what is love if not a battlefield? Literally, a
That is
battlefield.
great. You know what? I don't know if I was sold on it initially, but I'm coming around for sure. What can you speak to some of the challenges that are going to be thrown out there in order to acquire the affections of the love interest?
So I can't say specifically because I don't want to spoil anything, but I will say that if you are, so I say bachelorette inspired stuff as the main influence, but if you've ever seen Total Drama Island or Survivor or any of the like more out there shows that deal with reality TV, that's also something you can expect. And Total
Yeah,
Drama Island's a cartoon, but that's a pretty big influence on this.
I'm vaguely familiar with that one. My kids used to watch it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and that kind of ridiculousness sounds like a lot of fun to
It will be a lot of fun. It's going to be, it could be considered a love letter, but it's really just a parody.
Yeah.
It is definitely a straight up parody. It's going to be ridiculous. I'm taking auditions for it now, which you can find the audition form pinned on my Twitter. We've gotten about 100 submissions for it. So
Oh
people are
wow.
really, really excited for it. And that will be on Rock Punch ATL.
That that's a lot of submissions to whittle through.
I'm taking them bit by bit. You know, the
Do
auditions
you
end in
have
a
a
week.
process when it comes to casting?
So right now, the way that I'm going to cast this is right now, I didn't ask necessarily for role play. I'm more looking to see like what kind of webcams and mics people have, what their video quality is, what kind of characters they're interested in playing. And then I'm going to whittle it down to about 30 and have them submit a role play video of the character that they think they'd like to play. And then we'll whittle it down from there. I've been taking them bit by bit. There's been, it's been a mixed bag. I've had to eliminate some auditions because, not for nothing, when you put an audition form on the internet, sometimes you get spam.
Oh yeah,
But,
I'm sure.
um, and sometimes people are just, not for nothing, but there's a lot of, sort of like checklist questions, like safety and consent checklist stuff, because not for nothing, this is dealing with romance and like adult humor. So like some people just aren't comfortable necessarily with what we're going to do, and therefore, not for nothing. It's not bad to be uncomfortable with it, but because that's what the show is, it wouldn't necessarily be cast there. Not that anything's going to be really raunchy. I just want to make sure that everyone knows what they're getting into.
Yeah, I mean, like any good session, you need to set or a campaign, you need a good session zero to kind of make sure everyone's on the same page.
Absolutely. And there
So
will be. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I've done some stream games in the past, and one of the things I always hate is casting.
It can be hard. Because how do you pick and choose necessarily? Because there's so many talented people. But I have some strict guidelines for myself. One, the show needs to be diverse, and that's including the judges panel. I do not want to have a show that it does not have representation as much as I can possibly fit into it. And that's both of race, gender, sexuality, all across the board. So, like, making sure that that is key and, like, in my mind also affects casting. The other things that do are, like, I want to make sure that we have a mixed bag of, like, established creators and also ones that are just trying to get their foot in the door. Because, like, not for nothing, it's one thing to, like, run a show with a bunch of popular streamers and people in the TTRPG community. Like, that's great. A lot of people do that, but it makes it very hard for new creators to get in. And like everyone's been there, everyone's just started out being a content creator. Like it can be hard. It can be very hard. So what I want to do is I want to have a mix of established people with people who are less well known, so that we get the attention for the people that are less well known using some of the more established audiences. Just because like it feels more fair to do that than to just focus on people that have been established. And not for nothing, a lot of those people that are having difficulty being established are, people like me who are black, or people who are like me but darker skinned, who often have a hard time, getting their foot in the door, or people who have marginalized sexualities or genders. Just it's something that's important for me to keep in mind.
Yeah, I get that and understand that intimately from the other side. We did a project called Saver Dice a few years back, and Cody from Taking 20 was a smaller channel at the time, and he reached out to a handful of creators that were much larger than him to start this project, and they just all happened to look kind of the same. So we did get some pushback from that, and then going forward we've tried to change things up a little bit, and then when we do things as Nerdarchy, try to take that into consideration as well. But yeah, it's hard because in the sense that like when you're talking about a tabletop RPG where you have like maybe five people, right? And then for us it's like me and Ted founded Nerdarchy, and Ted's like my brother-in-law. So then you have like three, maybe three spots to play with. So it becomes this like juggling act.
Well, I think it's honestly, not all that hard. I think that one of the things that people need to be aware of is that you can befriend people of other backgrounds that have the same interests as you and include them on your projects. Like, there's no reason necessarily for groups to not do that. Um, just because, like, I've seen a lot of rhetoric on the internet in the TTRPG community as a whole where people are like, we can't find black streamers or we can't find people who are, of different backgrounds. And it's like, did you even look? Because they're all over the place. We are everywhere. Um, and it should be simple to like include people in that way. And like limitations with game tables, like as far as the groups that you have, like I mean, I have not for nothing. I have my podcast group, Arcanacast LLC, which is the parent company for Fast Times that I own. Like not for nothing, like not every game that I have will have every single cast member that's on Fast Times, and when you do that sort of like rotation with your games, it should be easy to get people of different backgrounds in. You know.
Absolutely, and like I like that's why I like doing these shows, this format, because it lets me reach out to a wide swath of people that are doing nerdy stuff. And like sometimes people are like surprised when I ask them to come on, but I'm like, the bar is really low. Just be doing something nerdy and like what you're doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And come and chat. It's super casual. So it has like opened up in the past where I can now invite people to do other things. I mean, not that you can't before, but to me, it always just feels weird. It's like, hey, I'm doing this thing and I'm trying to fill these specific roles. Do you want to come do this thing? It makes me feel shitty as a person.
Well, so I mean, that's one way of doing it, but like you don't need to say to someone when you ask them to join a game like we're asking you because you're of a marginalized background. You don't need to say that. You just need to ask them, do you want a spot? Do you want this spot? Do you want to be here? And like you can have it in your mind that you're like trying to be inclusive without being tokenizing. I think that a lot of it is just, making sure that you contact people, ask them if they want to be in the game, just like you would anyone else. You don't need to say, I'm trying to get more black streamers or more Asian streamers on here. You don't necessarily need to do that. You also don't necessarily need to be like, one of the mistakes that I see a lot of people make when they're trying to be more inclusive is that in their advertising materials or something, they'll be like, we're trying to be diverse, or we're trying to have more black streamers, or we're trying to have more queer streamers. And it's just like, let it speak for itself.
Yeah.
Just like you can have their faces in advertising materials and stuff like that, but you don't need to necessarily like say that as a big deal, especially if you've been called out for it in the past. It's just treat people like people and ask them if they want to be in the games, and they say no, whatever. It is what it is. But this format is a good way to meet people of diverse backgrounds, because then you have this like way of sort of being introduced to someone that you can talk to them and invite them. So that takes a little bit of the onus off of just reaching out to someone you don't necessarily know and asking.
Yeah, I think we've definitely we've done shows where we were playing a game with a company and then they wanted us to stream the game, and I was like, well, is this the look you want for your company if we stream this live? Right? It's fine that we're playing the game now, you know, um, getting to know each other. And the cool thing about that was when I brought it up, they're like, yeah, no, that's fine. And we just like recast the game, and I just invited some of my friends on the internet and mixed it up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially when I was looking around at the game table, I'm like, oh, we're all old white guys.
Yeah, it's unfortunately game tables are reflective of sort of the kinds of not for nothing, but nerd culture still tends to be pretty insular. And that means that, oftentimes you get to know groups of people that look like you. And a lot of times those groups happen to be white. Um, I think it's good to be actively pursuing ways of mitigating that. Not only because, you know, it's important to be inclusive and to have diverse sort of groups of people on your games, but also because diverse folks bring new perspectives to games. And I've said it before that, like, fantasy in many ways is stagnant because it doesn't allow for diversity a lot of the time. Like, you can see that in books and in other genres of fiction. Like, when you allow people of different backgrounds to do stuff within the genre of fantasy, whether it's TTRPG stuffs, books, TV shows, or whatever, you basically bring new experiences and breathe new life into the genre because those people don't have the same experiences as the people that have come before, and that always influences what they work on. So it's important to me to have that on my shows.
Absolutely. And also, like, personally, I just think it matters as well. I do like, and that's why we have, you know, moved in that direction when we do things, because I also look at it as like, if you want more people in the hobby, right? And there's demographics that aren't being reached,
Mhm.
like that would seems like a huge way to open up the hobby, right? To these other groups, and
Absolutely.
have these
Um,
shared experiences with more people.
yes, the other thing too is that, not for nothing, I do think so. There is a tendency on the internet to sort of like attack groups that don't necessarily have the most diversity in some of their shows. I think that it's important to, when that criticism happens, to reflect on it and like improve in that way. I think that we should allow for that too. I think that allowing for growth from criticism is a good thing to do. I'm not always on board with just like a straight up attack of a group. Sometimes it's deserved, in my opinion, but sometimes it's just like, if they do actively try to improve and they do actively try to change your tables and try to, promote different groups and, sort of like make the hobby less homogenous, I think that there's always room for that growth.
No, absolutely. So, with what are some of the? You said you're also taking part in some streams that you're in as a player.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which ones can I talk about? I was just in this past week. I was on Roll20's Twitch channel doing an indie showcase for Thirsty Sword Lesbians, which you can find at sword.gay. Yes, that's the actual address of the game, sword.gay. Um,
Easy
that
to
was
remember.
that was amazing. I am going to be on two streamed games with a few other TTRPG creators like Abria and a few others. But we don't necessarily. I know that that one's going to be on Valentine's Day. I don't think we have a title yet. Um, Most of the projects that are coming up for February are still like waiting to be announced, so I can't really talk about them too much.
So, do you prefer being in a GM seat or playing?
If you had asked me this like 3 months ago, I absolutely would have said GMing. Um, so I've played games like tabletop RPGs since I was 14 years old, 13 or 14. But I never thought I'd be good at GMing. I only started GMing 2 years ago, and I just caught the bug, and it's one of my favorite things to do. And I thought that I preferred it to playing, but it really depends on the kind of group that you're in, and it really depends on like who your players are, who you're playing with. Like, I enjoy both just as much as the other, but I am really invested in GMing, so it's like one of my. I would say GMing just because it's like something that I have a hard time saying no to. Like someone asked me to run a game, or someone said has like a cool idea for a game and they don't want to run it themselves and they're like looking for people. It's very hard for me to say no, you know. So
So is your style of GMing? Are you more of a prep GM or improv?
both. I like to have so any good improver gets oftentimes a prompt, you know, that they can volley off of or do stuff like that. That's very much what I have. I do like to have some pre-done descriptions for like bigger things that I'm really trying to put a visual in people's minds. But like you can't run games without improv. You can't plan for anything that like people are gonna do. So like I like to have like a bullet list of like the things that I know will happen in the game, like the plot points, not necessarily like this character will do X, this character will do Y, but like this is the big bad person, this is their henchman, these are locations that are in the game, these are some notes on what they look like, and then like just roll with things on the fly. Some of my best characters and some of the best moments have come from completely unplanned things. Um, I do, however, do a lot of world building, I would say. I do like prep worlds because I run homebrew games. I've never run a pre-gen campaign. I've never run anything that's in like the core D&D family of worlds, per se. So like I do a lot of background work for that, and I oftentimes, if I have an NPC that is improv, I will write notes about their voice so I remember it. But if I do have a pre-planned NPC, I'll write vocal notes just so that I remember, like, you know, that they need to sound like this or they need to sound like this. You know, it's very like you got to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think when I originally started out, I would write like almost like a module style notes, and then at some point it went to like more like a flow chart. If they go here, this happens. To like now, it's just like a couple bullet points, and then and that evolution has really come from writing out all the stuff and never using it, and the players doing like whatever. I'm like, why did I do all this work?
Yeah, I mean, so not for nothing, I like having the work. Just because like well no I do like it's basically the same progression for me, but like when I do have stuff that's written out like puzzles or things, if they don't get used it's just like okay, I can use this later somewhere else or later in the campaign. Like reskinning things is one of my favorite things to do, and like recycling, never throw away the stuff that you write for games, never throw away the things you write in general. You never really know where it's gonna go. I can feel my voice giving out on me. Oh god. But like you never really know where anything's gonna go. So like having that doesn't mean it's wasted, you know?
No, that is solid advice. And I agree. Anytime, just because you weren't able to use it this session doesn't mean you won't be able to use it another session or another game.
Yep.
But I am also very disorganized, so this does not help as much.
It's very strange. I am so disorganized about everything except for my job and my games. I
Yeah.
am the hottest mess alive. But like my games tend to be very well organized. Just because I don't know why. I don't know why that's the one thing. Like that and work. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because they're super important to me, but like I am a mess.
One of the last games I ran, I used Trello a lot,
hmm
and that kind of worked because I was able to break things up by plot, NPC, items, places, and kind of like
Yeah.
refer to things and find things kind of quickly.
I've never thought about using Trello for that. I use Trello for work. So
Yeah,
like
and you can
that's
color
actually a good
code
idea.
too.
Hmm?
And you can color code too, right? So like if you
Yeah.
have things in different categories but they're all linked, you could code them the same way. Um, we had
That's really fair. Maybe I should do that. Cause
yeah, I
not for
had
nothing, like that's actually a very good idea. I might steal that from you.
yeah, I think it was Crafting Muse V. I think I saw her tweet something about that or mention it somewhere. So I was like, oh, that actually would probably work. So when I ran a Cipher System game, which was like this mashup of Flash Gordon meets Thundar the Barbarian after the year 2020 kind of thing, I was like, let me try that. And it worked out pretty well. So,
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good idea because I use like Google Docs and it's just like there's a lot to keep track of, you know?
yeah. Well, and then also you can kind of link your Google Docs into those as well to where they
Mm-hmm.
are. I think it's good for like if you're running like sandboxy games and most of the stuff you work on tends to be sandboxy. Helps to
Yeah.
organize.
Um, no, it's a great idea. That's just great. Period. I love that. Trello's very easy to use too, so it's like I can't believe I hadn't thought of that.
Well,
Ah.
you
I
thank V from the Crafting Muse because that's where
thank
I
you,
stole
V,
the.
from the Crafting Muse. I really appreciate you and what you brought to my life. Thank you.
So, do you have a character type when you're a player?
You could say that. I tend to play a lot of aesthetic characters. It's only been recently that I will play like anything. It's like characters that have to be charismatic in some way. Usually like bitchy too. Not like bitchy, like not in a way that like disturbs play, but in a way that's like kind of sassy.
Yeah.
Um, but that's recently changed. Like I played a half, well, sort of changed. Like I recently played a half orc that was heavily inspired by Marilyn Monroe and Jennifer Coolidge. It was just a really good time. And I also done like just some. There's really not, now that I think about it, now there's really not. It used to be that I had to play the prettiest character or the most attractive character or whatever, but now it's sort of just like I will play anything that's interesting, anything that like makes me happy, which sometimes will be an old lady as a PC. That'll be great. Or even like just playing dudes. Like I will play a manly dude. That's fine. I'll do it. That's great. It's wonderful. I'll fucking do that shit. Like it doesn't really matter to me.
Your voice work is great.
Thanks. It's honestly one of the things that has gotten me the most attention is like the voice stuff, and it's also really cool because I used to hate my voice a lot, and it's been very cool to see like what I can do with it and what I can stretch with it, and like I'm constantly learning new accents and just new ways of experimenting with tone and stuff. So it's a lot of fun.
Do you have any tips or tricks for like keeping the voices separated? And like my biggest problem is if I do a voice is chances are at some point I'm going to forget the voice I was doing.
I write voice notes. I also take recordings of some of my voices, the ones that I really need to keep consistent. It was a problem for me starting the podcast, keeping some of the voices consistent, so that's helped me a lot. As far as like differentiating voices from others, one of the biggest things that I would say is to have your characters speak in different cadences because you can have like even if you don't do like extensive voice work, like a character that talks like this and a character that talks like this, like not too much of a tonal shift, but definitely two different characters, you know? So that's why I always advise people to start with doing like different voices for D&D characters. Think about the ways at which you speak, the like way emphasis you put on different words, the breath between like pauses and stuff like that.
What is the most exhausting character you've played because of the voice?
Oh god. Oh god. Probably it's a toss up between any Irish accented voice and the Jennifer Coolidge one. It took me a while to get. I'm not good with impressions,
Mhm.
so it took me a long time to really learn how to do this. Oh, oh, it's so hard to do. I want a hot dog. Like that was very hard to learn because I'm not great at imitating other people's voices. Um, And then, like, Irish was really hard to learn. Irish was very difficult, and it's still not perfect, but it's recognizable. So, you know, that kind of thing.
It was funny because I was trying to figure out the voice to a character. Tony Two Tusks was a half orc mafia enforcer, and I'm like walking around my house listening to Jersey accents, and I'm from Jersey. And my wife is like, "What are you doing? Why are you doing
Yeah, I have a similar problem with Boston.
that?"
Somehow Boston for me always goes Brooklyn or Jersey or Long Island, honestly. And I'm from the Boston area. I
Yeah,
just have a very neutral way of speaking. Because my mom was raised in Boston, and like she like unless she's angry, you don't notice that she has a Boston accent. So like I didn't grow up with one. So it's really hard. I'm
yeah.
still learning that one. So
So, you mentioned earlier that you haven't done any um, official content. All your stuff is homebrew.
mhm.
What's the draw there for you?
I think, you know, pre-gen campaigns have are really good and a great place to start. But my background is in, you know, writing stories, writing prose, writing stuff like that. And I've just never been drawn to run in someone else's world. Um, which is strange in some ways. I just really like the idea of like building and piecing together cultures and worlds and backgrounds. It's one of the more enjoyable back end things for me, you know?
No, I agree. I mean, I've only really run in one campaign that wasn't homebrew, and that was Eberron. Yeah, I've done a few one shots, and back in third edition,
Mhm.
I ran a campaign only because that world was like so much different. Like when I look at Forgotten Realms and Greyhawk, and they just to me they're just like regurgitations of Tolkien, kind of, with someone else's kind of like homebrew spin on them. So I just so instead of using that stuff, I would just rather make up my own stuff.
Yeah, also, not for nothing, but I had the same GM from the time I was like 14 until like last year was the main campaigns I played in, and everything he ran was homebrew. So
Mm.
like that was sort of like my main influence, and I guess that also sort of translated into what I play and what I run, rather what I run, I guess.
That makes sense as well. I mean, me and Ted have been playing together for the past, like, I guess 20-ish years. So we've kind of heavily influenced by each other in that way,
Hmm.
where we tend to prefer to run homebrew stuff. And also, like, pre-written adventures to me seem like a lot more work than me just making stuff up.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of stuff you can get from pre-gen campaigns. Like I like reading pre-gen like mods and stuff just so I can get ideas. Because sometimes you can always like you can steal a trap here or a puzzle here, and also like it helps fuel like my creativity. Like I have quite a few of them just lying around that I like to read and flip through sometimes when I'm stuck on ideas. But like I've never really had the urge to run them, and it's strange too because like I was nervous about starting GMing because I didn't think I was going to be good at it, and a lot of people are like, "You should run a pre-gen, and that'll be cool to start." And I was like, "No, no, it's all or nothing. I'm gonna do this way, or I'm just gonna suck at it." You know?
Yeah, it's a little bizarre, like people moving from player to GM. Like I feel like they create these like artificial obstacles, right? And
Hmm.
make it out to be much harder than it really is. Sure, like kind of
Absolutely.
like you said, it might suck when you first start, but once you get in there, hopefully you're playing with your friends, and they're going to be supportive of you running the game for them.
Well, that's the thing too. Like, I get a lot of like people that message me saying stuff like, I'm nervous to do like different voices for my characters. I'm nervous to run games and stuff. Like the first step to being a GM, one is being willing to make a fool of yourself. Two, the second step is to make sure that you play with people that you feel safe with, that will, let you practice the voices, let you make a fool of yourself. Like once you have that sort of like safety behind you, like you can just do whatever and it feels safe and it feels like something you can explore and learn and grow. I don't think if you aren't with a group like that, you're not with the right group for you.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully you're playing the game with your friends or people you would like to be your friends.
Well, I mean, that's another topic. Like, I have quite a few friends that I adore, but I wouldn't necessarily jump to put in a gaming group with me. Like, there are certain personalities that may not mesh with your game table. Like, I have a very, very close friend that we do not mesh well together when running games because we have completely different play styles. I am very um, anti numbers, and the rules must be broken once you know them.
Yeah.
And like he is very like rules heavy, which is just a different play style. So it's like not every friend is great to DM for or play with, but might be great in other ways.
Yeah, I mean that's part of figuring out your gaming group, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what works for your table.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely some fits that are better than others.
Definitely. Like not everyone's gonna enjoy the kind of games I run. Like I don't tend to run dungeon crawlers. I don't enjoy them personally, so I don't run them. But some people love them, and I'm not the GM for them, and that's fine. Not every game is for everyone.
Yeah, we don't delve the dungeons so much anymore. We're like our sessions are generally like one combat per session. Is
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, I've run a lot of sessions that didn't even get to combat. Like that was mostly player influence, though. Like I usually plan for it, but
yeah. Yeah, that's kind of the same. I usually have one in my back pocket to throw that out there in case you need something when you need something to happen.
Mm-hmm.
That may or may not happen. I've actually the session I ran Saturday night. I had one encounter planned that didn't get used, but somehow they accidentally summoned the demon, and we did that instead. Um, so
There's a lot of stories that could be improved by accidentally summoned a demon. Definitely good. Definitely love that.
yeah.
Love that.
Well, so they were trying to like decipher this book, and one of them knew about magic, and one of them could read the language, but nobody could do both.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like, "Can I make a check with this character interpreting with disadvantage?" I'm like, "Sure." And the character rolled like double 20s on the disadvantage. So I was just like, well, I wasn't planning to have anything particularly happen with this, but because something like really crazy with the dice happened, I'm like, let's have something happen. So I had a demon crawl out of the book. Uh,
Sometimes the dice tell the story for you.
it's it's the other player at the table.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I love the fact that like the dice are this element of randomized chaos that can influence gameplay so much. It's great. Um, it's so fun. Also, like not for nothing, demon summoning always great, always going to end well. If
So
not for the characters, for me personally.
yeah, no, I feel that 100%. It's funny because like the demon kind of like lost the initiative. So it went last, and one of the players is like, I want to close the book on the demon. So like, because so like the initiative started with its like four of its arms like out of the book and like its head and shoulders, and so the monk runs up and just like shuts the book and is like grappling the book basically to keep it shut. Uh, and so that kind of created this interesting scenario, and also I love new players because they're willing to do things that like aren't on their character sheet.
Yes, I do love new players for that reason. I also love coaxing new players out of their shells with D&D. Like it's a lot of fun. Well, D&D and other games too, cuz like sometimes you'll get a player that's just like very nervous about what they're about to do or what they're about to play, and like sometimes they'll overly read the rules and you just be like, "Hey, hey, you want to do this thing? You want to do this thing? You can totally do this thing." And then by
Yeah.
the next session, you're just like, I shoot the gazebo, Eric. Basically, you know.
Yeah. So they were in they were in a inn, so they were in their room, and one of them was like, maybe we should throw the book out the window. And I was like, well, you can, but that's the busy road underneath with, a
Unleash
crowd
a
of people.
demon on the unsuspecting populace. Yes, that's a great idea. I love
Yeah,
PCs.
I'm not gonna lie. There was definitely part of me that was hoping they would do that to see the carnage ensue.
hmm
Um, and also one of the players was like, "Oh, that's kind of a them problem," and the rest of them were like, "No, we can't do that."
Oh, that's so great. I love that.
Yeah,
Oh, not for nothing. I do think that there is like this thing that happens when you are declared to be a PC in a group of PCs. That's just like this. I don't know. There's just like this element of chaos that gets added to your brain when you are, and this is true of me too. Because like you'll be the demon and you'll just be like, oh, they're doing that.
yeah,
Okay, that's a choice. That's a choice. That's a choice. I love that you've made a choice. you know?
yeah. They ended up casting suggestion and telling the demon to go back to its demon lord master and ask for permission, or whether this was a good idea or not. So that's how they kind of got rid of the demon for now. Even though, but this
Okay.
demon was not planned, and I think this demon will probably resurface at some point.
I love characters like that. The unplanned things always turn out really well.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
always for PCs, but in general.
It makes things more interesting.
hmm
So Brian has a question. I've wanted to run a very artsy court of Fey encounter kind of based on the balls from Posey. I don't know what that is.
Pose.
Pose.
It's a show based around the ballroom scene from New York, heavily centered on trans and queer people. Like
Okay.
have the party have to perform before a bunch of Fey lords. Any ideas? I can tell you how I would do it. So let's see. I would honestly, I would make the performance the battle. Basically turn, basically make the ball the battlefield and make the performance checks basically like combat checks, and have players like substitute their charisma for their attack score and go from there. And then have them have to stylize and describe how they're performing exactly, and then you can like basically there's a concept in ballroom where there's a panel of judges, and they give you a score from 1 to 10, and getting tens across the board, tens across the board is the best you can do, and basically have the judges do that, and when they please the judges, have them get special boosts or powers, maybe give bonuses for like style with magic, stuff like that. That's what
I
I would do.
like that. That is a great way to do it. I also like anytime you can take the mechanics and change them up and
I
use them differently.
love breaking D&D. I love
Mhm.
breaking everything. Not necessarily in like a game breaking sort of way. I'm not that kind of player or GM. If you can do it, then it's a
About
GM.
reconstructing.
Yeah, I like the like deconstructing and reconstructing things to surprise folks. Cause like not for nothing, but like you have a player that's played D&D, for example, for like decades. Throwing them in the middle of something like that would be, you know, just like a new experience for them, giving them something new for D&D.
I did something similar with they were infiltrating like a kobold lair, or needed to go through a kobold territory. Um, and it just so happens that the different kobold clans and tribes would settle their disputes annually and decide who was kind of like the ruling caste at that time via a game, a sporting event called Rat Ball. And the reigning champs had recruited an ogre as their goalie, and it was just like a big fat person to put in front of, in front of their goal, and they would eat the heads off of any kobolds that got too close. Has kind of kept them in charge. So these kobolds are like, well, we can take you through and show you where you want to go if you help us win. So they played in the game instead of the kobolds to help them win, and they were using athletic and acrobatic scores to kind of do like combat instead of their normal attacks.
Yeah, I love changing stuff up like that. So the idea for that ball is actually taken from something that I'm going to be running in the future very, very soon. So keep an eye out for that.
Oh, nice.
Hmm.
It sounds like a lot of fun, and like I said, I like when you can mix up the mechanics in ways that people aren't used to. It's things like when someone's like, "I want to blend into the crowd," that's check, but use your charisma instead of your
Hmm.
your dexterity score.
Or
Um,
like I want to blend in with these posh folks. Like yeah, and stuff like that is really cool.
yeah.
Um, I also love interesting ways of viewing charisma because, like, not for nothing, like it's rules as written. Charisma is not just looking pretty, but for some reason, a lot of people take it that way. I love like coaxing people into playing characters that are like using charisma and interesting ways of speech and other things rather than just looking pretty. Although I'm a hypocrite for doing that because what do I play? What did I play for a decade? Boring, pretty characters. Whatever.
How many of them
Fine.
were
It's
bards?
fine. Um, only one. Only one.
What
No,
do you
two.
do you have a
Two.
preferred class that you kind of gravitate towards?
So my favorite classes are sorcerer and warlock, and until recently, I was never allowed to play a sorcerer or warlock because someone else always claimed it in the group, and I was not willing to fight. So
Oh, see, I kind of hate that. Like when in a group, because I'm always like, look, if you all want to be sorcerers and warlocks, go for it. I don't care. As a
yeah,
GM, I'll figure it out.
yeah. Well, not for nothing. Like, it was also because like the group that I played with, like my home games before, um, like we didn't always play D&D. We didn't just play D&D. We
Mhm.
played a lot of World of Darkness, D&D, Fate system stuff. Like we switched things up over decades. Our actual like we returned to D&D like before the pandemic with 5th edition, and that was like the first time we played actual D&D together in a while. I'd played it with other groups, but my main like group that I didn't DM for, I didn't. So
What is your go-to non-D&D RPG of choice?
Right now, probably Powered by the Apocalypse. I'm really a big fan of Powered by the Apocalypse, and the more that I use it, just because it's so roleplay centric. I have a game that I'm currently like trying to figure out the backgrounds for that I really want to run with Powered by the Apocalypse. I'm also a big fan of Quest. I think Quest makes combat super appealing and is really really cool. The one that I'm most excited to use is the Swords Fall and Motherlands games. Whenever I actually get the books for them, but like those are I'm super excited to use.
Yeah, I have not checked out any of those yet. I think we're gonna be doing quests soon. Like we've been rotating. Like the current stream game that we've been doing is kind of like we have a couple of our staff writers, our content director, and then me and Ted playing in. And so we've done D&D Cipher System, going back to D&D, and I think Doug, our content director, wants to run Quest.
Mhm.
Although he seems to be oscillating between different games that are non D&D games.
Yeah, I. So I'm currently like just trying to broaden my horizons with games because like I personally have only run D&D. I've played a lot of other things. So like the idea of running other things makes me nervous, but I do like want to create things that represent wider range of games than just D&D. Like with the podcast, we started doing holiday episodes where the characters will do a meta D&D thing where or not D&D rather, but tabletop thing where they will run a game in universe and we'll be playing our characters playing other characters in their universe. And those are always using different systems in D&D just because we want to get um, visibility on that. Like we use the henshin system, which is really, really, really good. It's based off of like Sentai warriors and stuff like that, like Power Rangers and stuff, and it's
Okay.
really cute. We also just did Visigoths and Molgoths, which was interesting. That was a lot of fun too.
We so we're currently playing a game of the Expanse,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of a home game. And that's going to be wrapping up soon. And I'm trying to sell the group on Monster of the Week.
Ooh, I haven't touched that yet. I've been told that I also need to play and or run Monster Hearts, but I have not yet. Maybe sometime soon.
But my limited, exposure to Powered by the Apocalypse, I've really enjoyed, and it's it. I just as I get older, the more rules light I am into.
Yeah, same. D&D always has its place. It's always going to have its place, but that's the reason why I like 5e because it's more narrative
Yeah,
than third or 3.5 or do we even talk about 4 anymore? Do we recognize 4
but
anymore?
I do know some people that is their preferred. I played four for like a year and a half, I think.
I the most of the people that I know that liked 4, for some reason seem to be like miniature games fans,
Yeah,
whereas I am not really.
that makes
Um,
sense.
I only played 4 for a bit before my entire group was like, we're going back to 3, 5. We're just gonna do that, you know.
We went to Mutants and Masterminds.
Oh,
So
God, I haven't heard that in such a long time. I played one session of Mutants and Masterminds in my my high school had a gaming club that started when I was there, and we did one session of Mutants and Masterminds. That was it.
so I guess what happened was someone else ran a Heroes Unlimited game, and I was like, I don't really like the Palladium systems so much.
Mhm.
They're very unbalanced and kind of clunky and all over the place. The lore and stuff is pretty cool, but the mechanically I wasn't really digging on them, so I started digging around, and that
Mhm.
led me to Mutants and Masterminds. And then so we ran a heroes game through that, a fantasy game through that. We did like a Dresden verse style game through that, and then like when we kind of like started doing Nerdarchy and poked our head up from Mutants and Masterminds five, we discovered that D&D was coming out with another edition. Like I was totally oblivious to D&D Next and all the play testing that was going on, and we started looking at that probably when the basic rules dropped, and he'd been done doing Nerdarchy for like 6 months at that point. And like I was just like, hey, there's a new D&D. You guys want to talk about that? So it just kind of
Yeah,
worked lined up for us.
this is also reminding me that I really want to play or run a Masks game, which is, I believe, also powered by the Apocalypse. But, like, I need to do something with superheroes desperately because I really love superhero universes and stuff.
Yeah, I I really want to play in like a tech style game.
Ooh, a tech style game I like. So,
No, no,
I
tech, the superhero tech
oh yeah,
where it's just ridiculous.
I get what you mean now.
Yeah.
I was about to say and launch into a rant of how I'm trying desperately to find a system that can work for something like Shadowrun, but isn't Shadowrun because I find Shadowrun really clunky. There's just a
Yeah,
lot of
we did a
numbers.
cipher system game in the world of Shadowrun, and that kind of worked out. Okay, like the GM did a good job with it. They actually introduced way more mechanical stuff from cipher system than I probably would have. But it still worked.
Like the lore of Shadowrun, I adore,
I
but
feel like sometimes we're living it, minus the cool elves and trolls.
if we could get the cool elves and troll stuff, that would be great. Universe, like
Hmm.
we could get that. We could get that. We should.
So we are coming up on the hour mark. Final thoughts before we head on out.
Um, Not really. This has just been really fun. It's really fun to get to chat this kind of stuff. And I had a great time.
Yeah, we like to keep it casual. I appreciate you coming on. And as always, folks, in the description, you can find links so that you can go follow along and check all the places where Perseph- I can't talk. Persephiroth is, and go follow them, of course. Until next time, stay nerdy.